Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And in this episode, we're going to take a look at House of the Dragon, and specifically an article in Screen Rant, which tries to explain where the various houses are during the events of this show. We obviously know where Targaryen is, but what of Lannister or Stark, and so forth. So I shall put myself down in my usual little corner, and we shall take a look at this article and discuss. Here we go. So here's the headline, says it all really, where every Game of Thrones family is during House of the Dragon. Game of Thrones major houses will play varying roles during House of the Dragon, with some families being far more integral to the war than others. Yep, some will barely feature at all, I suspect, and others will be very, very sort of deeply ingrained in the action. HBO's House of the Dragon prequel series gave the Targaryens the spotlight, with the other families of Game of Thrones spread out across Westeros. With the Lannisters and the Baratheons not yet in control of the Iron Throne, House of the Dragon will have far fewer families vying for power in King's Landing. Most of the conflict instead comes from the Targaryen civil war. However, when the action begins for the Dance of the Dragon's War, the ancestral families from Game of Thrones will slowly begin taking sides and leaving their homes to take up arms. But as I say, some may not appear, some may only appear slightly, some may be very prominent, but we shall see as it unfolds. While Game of Thrones primarily centred on the Stark family, Ned's ancestors will be taking a back seat at the start of House of the Dragon's timeline. Aye, because they're from up north, and King's Landing's down south. Since House of the Dragon Season 1 will likely be laying the groundwork for the Dance of the Dragons after the death of King Viserys I, it's possible that House Stark may not have a significant presence in the story until Season 2. It's possible they may not even appear in Season 1. Rather, the most important houses at the start of House of the Dragon will be the Targaryens, Hightowers and Valerians, the latter two of which weren't prominently featured in Game of Thrones. Since House of the Dragon's timeline seemingly begins approximately 170 years before Game of Thrones Season 1, the prequel series won't be bringing back any of the original characters. Well, I don't know, it could bring the Ice King. That's about it, really. However, the major houses from Game of Thrones will still be playing with power during this timeline, with certain families having already established themselves as prominent nobility before House of the Dragon story takes place. Here's a breakdown of where every major family from Game of Thrones will be during the events of HBO's House of the Dragon. Targaryens. Well, of course, House Targaryen are the main motivators of this season, so it's they're going to be central to it. But yeah, let's see what they say. House Targaryen will be in King's Landing throughout House of the Dragon, with the family having sat on the Iron Throne for over 100 years by this point in time. When the story begins, King Viserys I, Paddy Considine, will sit on the throne in King's Landing with his daughter and heir, Princess Rhaenyra, Emma Darcy, ruling from the Targaryens' historic home of Dragonstone. Prince Daemon Targaryen, Matt Smith, the brother of Viserys I and uncle to Rhaenyra, will also be located in Dragonstone while she rules, where he will marry his niece without his brother's permission. In addition, King Viserys' first wife, Alicent Hightower, Olivia Cook, and his son Aegon II, Tom Glencairn, will be in the Red Keep, where the latter two characters will remain after the king's death. House Stark. One does not simply walk into House Stark. When House of the Dragon's conflict about the succession of King Viserys begins, House Stark will be located back in Winterfell, where Lord Cregan Stark leads the family. Before the Dance of the Dragons, House Stark had largely refrained from engaging in royal politics or conflicts at court. Then, in 129 AC, Queen Rhaenyra sent her firstborn son to Winterfell to gain support for her claim, with House of the Dragons Lord Stark and Jacaerys officially making the Pact of Ice and Fire. Cregan remained in Winterfell for most of House of the Dragons events, though he would finally march to King's Landing in 131 AC after Rhaenyra's death. Known as the Hour of the Wolf, Cregan Stark's arrival at King's Landing saw him hold court at the Red Keep for 6 days, whereafter he was named the Hand of the King by Rhaenyra's son, Prince Aegon the Younger. However, he quickly resigned from this position as the Hand, and once King Aegon III Targaryen was officially crowned, Cragan finally began his journey back to the Game of Thrones Winterfell. Yeah, he never actually challenged for the kingship, didn't want to, didn't need to. He was quite safe being sort of King of the North. House Lannister. And it's saying, as expected, by me, because I know that House Lannister is deeply involved in it. As expected, House Lannister still had an important role to play during House of the Dragon's timeline. During this time, the Lannister family was led by Jason Lannister, who's played by Jefferson Hall, who had unsuccessfully vied against his twin brother for the hand of Princess Rhaenyra years before. House of the Dragon's Lannister characters will also see Jason's twin brother, Sir Tyland, play an important role here, as he served as the Master of Ships for King Viserys I Targaryen before his death, and later as Master of Coin for Aegon II Targaryen during the Dance of the Dragons. Jason and Tyland supported Aegon II against Rhaenyra's claim, with Jason based in Casterly Rock, while Tyland had an important location in King's Landing. On the night King Viserys first dies, it will be Tyland Lannister who gathers the small council to discuss the succession plan and claim Aegon II as the rightful King of Westeros. Baratheons. The leader of the House Baratheon in House of the Dragon Civil War is Boros Baratheon, who was Lord of Storm's End during the reigns of both King Viserys I and Aegon II. Since Rhaenyra and Boros were cousins, it was assumed he would support her claim to the throne, though he unexpectedly chose to side with the Greens when they visited him in Storm's End. Lord Baratheon would primarily remain in Storm's End, aside from leading a few marches during Dance of the Dragons, only heading to King's Landing once Rhaenyra died. Boros's daughter Ellen Baratheon will also be featured as a character in House of the Dragon, and although her role in Season 1 is unclear, she'll eventually come into play at Storm's End when the various kingdoms try to make marriage pacts with her father. And the Greyjoys. Lord Dalton Greyjoy, the Red Kraken, will unsurprisingly be found in the Iron Islands during House of the Dragon. The ancestor of Game of Thrones, Theon Greyjoy, comes to power before the death of Viserys I Targaryen, where the young lord would become known as one of Pike's great Ironborn heroes. After the Green Council first appeals to Lord Greyjoy on Pike, Dalton eventually chooses to support the claim of Rhaenyra and joins the Black Allegiance. House Arryn. Bitty. If House of the Dragon features flashbacks to Rhaenyra's early childhood, the prequel will feature her mother, Aemma Arryn, in King's Landing as the wife of King Viserys I prior to her death. House of the Dragon will also see Jane Arryn, the Maiden of the Vale, leading her house from the Eyrie during the reigns of King Viserys I and Aegon II Targaryen. House Arryn would quickly support Rhaenyra's claim, with Jane remaining in the Vale throughout the majority of the war. House Arryn's family member Joffrey Arryn will also be an important figure in the Eyrie, as Knight of the Gate, who was also Jane's heir. Towards the end of the Dance of the Dragons, the Arryn family will become extremely important once a dragon egg belonging to the Black Allegiance hatches in the Eyrie. House Tully. House Tully, the family of Game of Thrones' Catelyn Stark, saw 3 changes in leadership during the Dance of the Dragons War. House of the Dragon will begin with Lord Grover Tully in charge and located at River Run. Grover's advanced age during the House of the Dragon led his grandson, Elmo Tully, to take matters into his own hands, where he decided to remain neutral in the war until Rhaenyra and Daemon Targaryen's bannermen finally visited River Run. Elmo would then leave the Trident and succeed his grandfather as the Lord of River Run, soon leading an army to King's Landing. Elmo would quickly die on the road from bad water, where his eldest son, Sir Kermit Tully, it's hard to be green, became Lord of the River Run and took up his father's role, leading to the host at the Battle of the King's Road. House Martell. Martell will be joining the House of the Dragon story from their home of Dorne, where Prince Corin Martell leads the Game of Thrones family. House Martell remains in Dorne during the reign of Viserys I and Dance of the Dragons, with the Lord of Sunspear refusing to take part in the Targaryen civil war. While Game of Thrones House Martell joined the War of the Five Kings conflicts late, the family has virtually no role in House of the Dragon's political battles. House Tyrell. Like House Martell, the Tyrell family decides to stay out of the conflict during House of the Dragon, with the noble house instead dealing with rampant division already within the Reach. When House of the Dragon's Targaryen civil war begins, the Lord of Highgarden is only an infant, with his mother serving as regent. Though it was assumed that Lionel Tyrell's mother would side with the Hightowers and Aegon II, she ultimately refused to participate in the war. This is a stark change from Game of Thrones, where House Tyrell was far more greedy and power hungry. Instead, House Tyrell will likely serve a similar role to that of Lisa Tully and Robin Arryn in Game of Thrones, who largely avoided the war as they stayed isolated in the Vale. And that's basically the all the houses, all the major houses, you know. But we shall come up and round that off and discuss. Yeah, so I think that was quite an in-depth and interesting piece from Screen Rant. Obviously, it's been lifted directly from sort of the books that they've gone through and gisted the books to say who goes where, who stays where, who travels, who fights, who stays at home. But yeah, it's interesting. It gives a shape. I mean, as time goes on, we get more and more information sort of released or leaked or, you know, made available. And it's just getting better and better. And like I said before, this is one of those things where when it was first announced, I was like, meh, because Game of Thrones had died. But then, as more and more of it comes out, as we're getting nearer to the release in August, I'm getting more and more excited. I think it's going to be very, very good. I think it's good. How can I put this? They will have learnt from Game of Thrones how not to end the series. And by all accounts, the ending has already been arranged. So we're not going to have some drift off into, and then it was a dream. So I have great hopes, great expectations. I am ultimately confident this will be an excellent show. It's one that we can all really get our teeth into and enjoy from episode 1. I mean, it's going to be bang. And the worst part, of course, will be you get to the 10th episode of season 1. You're going, I've got to wait another 40 weeks or whatever, how long, you know. It's the waiting that does it. They should make the entire series in one go and just drop out, 50, 60, 70 episodes. I'd rather have that. But anyway, we haven't got that. So we go forward with hope in our heart and a song on our lips. And we look forward to the end of August. Anyway, thank you for listening so far, if you have. We'll end it here. If you like what you hear and see on the channel, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Ring the bell for notifications. We're going to be putting a lot more out on Game of Thrones, as well as everything else. Hit a like, leave a comment, and until next time, stay safe, stay well, and goodbye.